The gunshot echoed through Concordia, Kansas like a clap of thunder, sending Rosco Forrester diving behind an overturned wagon as bullets splintered the wood around him. It wasn't how he'd imagined meeting his bride pinned down by outlaws on what should have been his wedding day in the spring of 1875. "Some wedding present," he muttered, checking his revolver with dirt-stained fingers. His wedding suit was torn at the shoulder, hat long gone, and the marriage certificate in his pocket was now stained with sweat. This wasn't how things were supposed to go, but then again, nothing about this union had followed the expected path. Beatrice Blackburn, soon to be Beatrice Forrester, crouched behind a water trough across the dusty street, her white wedding dress splattered with mud and her carefully arranged hair coming undone. Somehow, despite the danger, she'd managed to keep hold of her father's shotgun. The determined set of her jaw told Rosco she wasn't about to let a gang of bank robbers ruin her wedding day. "Rosco," she called out when the shooting paused. "I count 4 of them." "3, he corrected, nodding toward the motionless body by the bank entrance. "Sheriff Holloway got one." Another volley of shots rang out, and Rosco heard Beatrice's father yelling from inside the bank where most of the wedding guests had taken cover. Judge Wilson was in there too, the man who was supposed to be marrying them right now instead of cowering behind the teller's counter. "Whenever you're ready, darlin'," Beatrice called, a hint of impatience in her voice. "I'd still like to be married before sundown." Despite everything, Rosco grinned. 6 months ago, he never would have believed he'd be here, about to marry the most stubborn, beautiful woman in Kansas territory. Nobody in town thought their hasty arrangement would last a week, let alone make it to a wedding day. Yet here they were, fighting for their lives together, about to prove everyone wrong. As the outlaws reloaded, Rosco caught Beatrice's eye and nodded. They'd need a miracle to salvage this day. But then again, their entire relationship had been nothing short of miraculous from the start. The day they met had been equally chaotic, though with considerably less gunfire. Rosco had ridden into Concordia after 2 years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. At 28, he'd saved enough money to put down roots, purchasing a modest ranch 10 miles outside town. He was no longer the penniless cowboy drifting from job to job, but a landowner with ambitions. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as he led his horse down Main Street, dust coating his boots and trail-worn clothes. All he wanted was a bath, a meal, and a bed in that order. What he got instead was his first glimpse of Beatrice Blackburn. She stood on the boardwalk outside her father's general store, arguing fiercely with a man twice her size. At 23, Beatrice had already earned a reputation for her outspoken ways and independent spirit. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and her blue eyes flashed with indignation. "I don't care if you're friends with the mayor, Mr. Peterson," she was saying, hands planted firmly on her hips. "You'll pay what you owe like everyone else. That credit ledger isn't written in sand." The man Peterson loomed over her threateningly. "You'd best mind your tongue, Miss Blackburn. Your father's too soft, letting a woman run his business affairs. Perhaps you need a reminder of your proper place." Before Rosco realized what he was doing, he dropped his horse's reins and stepped between them. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice deceptively calm. Peterson sneered at the dust-covered newcomer. "Nothing that concerns you, stranger." "Well now," Rosco drawled, "when I see a man threatening a lady in broad daylight, I tend to make it my concern." What followed was a brief but decisive confrontation that ended with Peterson sprawled in the street, nursing a bloodied nose and wounded pride. Rosco hadn't thrown a punch, didn't have to. Sometimes a man's reputation preceded him, and Rosco's quiet confidence spoke volumes. "I didn't need rescuing," Beatrice informed him afterward, though there was a hint of appreciation in her eyes. "I noticed," Rosco replied with a slight smile. "But my mama raised me with certain expectations about how ladies should be treated, and that wasn't it." "Well, your mama would be proud," she said, and then, to his surprise, "You look half dead from the trail. Come inside and I'll fix you something to eat while you tell me what brings you to Concordia." That meal changed the course of his life, though neither of them knew it then. Over coffee and beef stew, Rosco explained his plans for the ranch. He'd purchased a ramshackle place that needed considerable work, but had good water and better grazing land. "Ambitious," Beatrice commented, refilling his coffee cup. "Most cowboys passing through don't plan much beyond their next job or bottle." "I've had my fill of drifting," he admitted. "Time to build something lasting." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Beatrice's father, Harold Blackburn, a thin man with kind eyes and a perpetually worried expression. The widower had raised Beatrice alone since she was 15, and the experience had clearly aged him. "We've got that shipment from Topeka to unload," he said before noticing Rosco. "Oh, I didn't realize we had a customer." Introductions were made, and Rosco found himself volunteering to help with the heavy lifting. By day's end, he'd not only unloaded a wagon of supplies but also earned an invitation to Sunday dinner and Harold Blackburn's gratitude. "You don't have to keep thanking me, sir," Rosco insisted as he prepared to leave. "It's the least I could do after Miss Blackburn's hospitality." "Beatrice doesn't take to strangers easily," Harold confided. "My daughter has strong opinions about most folks, especially men. The fact that she didn't run you off with my shotgun is remarkable in itself." Looking over at Beatrice as she tallied the day's receipts, her brow furrowed in concentration, Rosco found himself thinking that remarkable was exactly the right word for her. The weeks that followed established a routine. Rosco divided his time between building up his ranch and visiting town for supplies, always timing his trips to coincide with Beatrice's shifts at the store. Their conversations grew longer, their shared laughter more frequent, and the townsfolk began to notice. Concordia was a small place of about 800 souls, and gossip traveled faster than telegraph messages. The handsome rancher and the storekeeper's headstrong daughter made for interesting speculation. Some wagered they'd court before summer's end. Others insisted Beatrice was too independent to settle for any man, especially a former drifter with uncertain prospects. What no one anticipated was the fever that swept through town in late August. It hit the vulnerable hardest: the elderly, the very young, and those already weakened by other ailments. Harold Blackburn, whose lungs had never fully recovered from a bout of pneumonia the previous winter, was among the first to fall seriously ill. Rosco arrived at the store one morning to find it closed, a hastily scrawled note on the door directing customers to return the following day. Concerned, he made his way to the modest house behind the store where the Blackburns lived. He found Beatrice red-eyed from exhaustion, having spent 3 sleepless nights tending to her father while trying to maintain the store during daylight hours. "The doctor says he needs constant care," she explained, her voice hoarse as she slumped at the kitchen table. "I can't leave him, but if the store doesn't open, we don't eat, and there are orders waiting to be filled." Without hesitation, Rosco removed his hat. "Tell me what needs doing at the store. I'll handle it." "You don't know the first thing about running a general store," Beatrice protested weakly. "I can count and read labels," Rosco replied, "and I'm a quick study. You focus on your father, I'll mind the business." For 2 weeks, Rosco did exactly that. He opened the store each morning, handled customers with unexpected diplomacy, and kept the books as best he could. Evenings found him delivering meals to Beatrice and sitting with Harold so she could snatch a few hours of desperately needed sleep. On the night Harold's fever finally broke, Beatrice found Rosco dozing in a chair by her father's bedside, a damp cloth in his hand. She studied his face, the strong line of his jaw now covered in stubble, the creases at the corners of his eyes, the steadfast set of his mouth even in sleep. Something shifted inside her, a recognition that this man had become essential in ways she hadn't foreseen. "Rosco," she whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. He woke instantly, alert. "Is something wrong? Does he need the doctor?" "No," she said, a genuine smile breaking through her fatigue. "His fever's broken. I think the worst has passed." Relief washed over Roscoe's features. "Thank God." "Thank you," Beatrice corrected, impulsively taking his hand. "I don't know what would have happened without your help." Rosco looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "You'd have managed. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Beatrice Blackburn." The words hung between them, weighted with something neither was quite ready to name. Beatrice withdrew her hand first, but the connection remained, unspoken yet undeniable. Harold's recovery was slow but steady. By October, he could manage short shifts at the store, though his strength was far from what it had been. Rosco continued to help when needed, but he also had his ranch to consider as winter approached. It was during this period that disaster struck. A banking crisis back east had ripple effects that reached even small Kansas towns. The Concordia Bank called in loans, businesses struggled, and suddenly credit that many relied upon dried up completely. For the Blackburns, the timing couldn't have been worse. Harold had extended generous credit to many townspeople during his illness, allowing them to take necessary supplies with promises to pay when they could. Now, with winter approaching and their own debts to suppliers coming due, the ledger showed alarming deficits. "We could lose everything," Harold confessed to Rosco one evening as they reviewed the books after closing. "The bank won't extend our note, and if we can't pay our suppliers, we'll have no inventory to sell." "How much do you need to weather this?" Rosco asked, studying the figures. Harold named a sum that made Beatrice, who was stacking cans nearby, freeze in place. It was substantial, more than most folks in town would see in years. "I have it," Rosco said simply. Both Blackburns stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious," Beatrice finally managed. "I am. I've been saving for years, planning to expand the ranch come spring. That can wait. This can't." Harold shook his head firmly. "We can't accept such charity, son." "Not charity," Rosco corrected. "An investment. I'll become a partner in the store. 1/3 ownership, with profits split accordingly once debts are cleared." The proposal led to heated discussion. Harold saw the practical benefits but worried about owing so much to one man. Beatrice, meanwhile, was torn between gratitude and suspicion. "Why would you do this?" she demanded later when they were alone on the store's back porch. "What do you really want, Rosco Forrester?" He looked at her steadily, moonlight casting shadows across his features. "I want to help people I care about. Is that so hard to believe?" "In my experience, yes," she replied bluntly. "Men don't offer that kind of money without expecting something in return." "Your opinion of my gender isn't particularly charitable," Rosco observed dryly. "I've earned my skepticism honestly." Rosco sighed, leaning against the porch railing. "Your father gave me a chance when I first arrived, treated me like a man worth knowing, not just another drifter passing through. That matters. The store matters to this town, and you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You matter to me, Beatrice, more than I expected." The confession hung in the crisp autumn air. Beatrice's expression softened momentarily before her practical nature reasserted itself. "If you become a partner, what does that mean day to day? Will you want to make decisions about how we operate? I know cattle and land, not dry goods and ribbons, Rosco replied with a hint of amusement. I trust your business sense. I'd only ask to review the books monthly and be consulted on major decisions. After further negotiation, the partnership was formalized. The immediate crisis was averted, but the arrangement created new complications, chief among them the gossip that erupted through town. Why would a man invest so heavily in a struggling business unless there were other motives? The most obvious conclusion was that Rosco was courting Beatrice through financial means, effectively buying his way into the family. These whispers reached Beatrice, of course, and wounded her pride deeply. The idea that people thought she could be purchased along with store inventory was intolerable. Her reaction was to maintain a cool, strictly professional relationship with Rosco, despite the growing affection she privately harbored for him. For his part, Rosco recognized her withdrawal but misinterpreted the cause. He believed she resented the partnership and his presence in her family's business. Pride kept him from addressing the tension directly, leading to strained interactions that the entire town noticed and discussed endlessly. The situation might have continued indefinitely if not for the Christmas Eve blizzard of 1874. The storm hit with little warning, transforming Concordia from a bustling holiday market to a ghost town in hours as people hurried home to safety. Rosco had come to town for supplies and found himself trapped as visibility dropped to nothing and temperatures plummeted. The Blackburns insisted he stay with them rather than attempt the dangerous ride back to his ranch. The three spent Christmas Eve huddled around the kitchen stove as wind howled outside, sharing stories and hot cider. For the first time in weeks, the atmosphere between Rosco and Beatrice thawed, warmed by the simple pleasure of safety amid the storm and Harold's gentle humor. When Harold retired early, claiming fatigue, Beatrice and Rosco found themselves alone by the fire. The crackling flames cast a golden glow over the room, and the howling wind outside made their shelter seem all the more precious. "Thank you for staying," Beatrice said after a comfortable silence. "Father worries about you out at that ranch alone." "Only your father?" Rosco asked, watching her face closely. Beatrice met his gaze directly, something shifting in her expression. "I've been unfair to you these past weeks." "You've been distant," he agreed. "I assumed you regretted our partnership." "No, it's not that." She twisted her hands in her lap. "People are talking. They're saying you only invested in the store to court me, that I'm part of the purchase." Understanding dawned on Roscoe's face. "And that bothers you?" "Wouldn't it bother you to be thought of as property to be acquired along with a business?" "I imagine it would," he conceded. "Though I'm more concerned with what you think than town gossip." Beatrice stared into the fire. "I think you're a good man who's been kinder to my family than we had any right to expect, and I think I've been afraid of what might happen if I admitted how much that means to me." Rosco shifted closer on the sofa. "What are you afraid of exactly?" "Dependence," she answered immediately. "Losing myself. My mother did that, gave everything to my father until there was nothing left of her own dreams. When she died, he was lost because he'd become the center of her world, but she was just a part of his." "Is that how you see marriage? One person consumed by the other?" "Isn't that how it usually works? The woman disappears into the man's life, his name, his home." Rosco considered this seriously. "It can be that way, I suppose. But it doesn't have to be. Two people can build something together without either being diminished." "A pretty theory," Beatrice said, "but I've seen little evidence of it in practice." "Then perhaps we should create that evidence ourselves." The statement hung between them, bold and unmistakable in its implications. Beatrice's eyes widened. Rosco Forrester, are you proposing to me on Christmas Eve in the middle of a blizzard? He smiled, taking her hand gently. I'm suggesting that there's a conversation worth having about our future. Because I love you, Beatrice Blackburn, and I believe you might feel something similar for me, despite your best efforts to avoid it. Beatrice didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't respond immediately either. When she did speak, her voice was steady despite the emotion behind her words. I do care for you, more than I've cared for anyone outside my family, but caring isn't enough for marriage. What would be enough? He asked quietly. Partnership, she answered without hesitation. True partnership, not you protecting me or providing for me, but standing beside me. Respecting my mind and my abilities, allowing me to remain Beatrice, not just Mrs. Forrester. I wouldn't want you to be anything but yourself, Rosco said. It's who you are that I've fallen in love with, your strength, your determination, your fierce loyalty. Changing any of that would be like painting over a masterpiece. The sincerity in his voice reached her in ways his words alone might not have. Beatrice felt tears threatening and blinked them away impatiently. I need time to think, she finally said. This isn't a decision to make in one night, no matter how romantic the setting. Rosco nodded, disappointment evident but acceptance stronger. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. The blizzard raged for 2 more days, giving them ample opportunity for conversation without the prying eyes and ears of Concordia's gossips. By the time the snow stopped and roads cleared, something fundamental had shifted between them. No formal agreement had been reached, but possibilities that had seemed remote now felt tantalizingly within reach. As January 1875 brought the new year, Beatrice found herself contemplating a future very different from what she'd imagined. Rosco was patient, never pressing for an answer but making his feelings clear through consistent actions and quiet devotion. It was Harold who finally broke the stalemate, sitting both of them down in late January after the store closed. I'm not getting any younger, he began bluntly, and my health isn't what it was. I need to know Beatrice will be taken care of when I'm gone. Father, please, Beatrice protested. You're not dying. Not today, no, he agreed, but I'm practical enough to plan ahead. Rosco, you love my daughter. Anyone with eyes can see it. And B, for all your independence, you light up when he walks into a room. Both younger people shifted uncomfortably, unaccustomed to such directness about their feelings. Harold continued undeterred. Life's too short for this dance you're doing. Either commit to each other or move on, but stop torturing yourselves and everyone who cares about you with this uncertainty. After he left them alone, an awkward silence fell. Finally, Rosco cleared his throat. Your father's a wise man. Sometimes too wise for his own good, Beatrice muttered, but there was affection in her tone. He's right about my feelings, Rosco said quietly. They haven't changed. Beatrice looked at him directly, her decision visibly forming as she spoke. I've been afraid of making a mistake, of losing myself in loving someone, but I'm beginning to think the real mistake would be denying what's in my heart because of fear. And what is in your heart, Beatrice? You, she said simply. Though heaven help me, I never planned on falling in love with a cowboy. Rosco's face transformed with joy. Is that a yes, then? You'll marry me? It's a yes, Beatrice confirmed, but on conditions. I want to remain involved in the store. I want a true partnership in our marriage with my opinions valued equally to yours. And I want us to build a life that honors both our dreams, not just yours. I accept all your conditions, Rosco said solemnly before breaking into a grin. Though I should warn you, most of my dreams lately have centered around you anyway. Their engagement announcement sent ripples of shock through Concordia. Few had believed the proud, independent Beatrice would ever agree to marriage, especially to a man who had been a stranger less than a year earlier. The fact that Rosco now owned part of the Blackburn store only added fuel to the speculation. "They're saying you bought yourself a bride," Beatrice's childhood friend Martha informed her bluntly during a dress fitting. "That it's a business arrangement, not a love match." "People will talk regardless of what we do," Beatrice replied, though the words stung. "What matters is that Rosco and I know the truth." But the whispers persisted. Some claimed Beatrice was marrying out of gratitude, others that she'd been pressured by her father's failing health. The cruelest suggested she was with child. Why else rush a wedding when they'd known each other less than a year? The speculation took its toll. Beatrice found herself questioning her decision during moments of doubt, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Rosco, sensing her uncertainty, suggested postponing the wedding. "We could wait until summer," he offered one evening as they walked along the creek that ran behind the Blackburn property. "Give people time to accept us, and let them think their gossip drove us apart." Beatrice shook her head firmly. "No, I won't have our lives dictated by wagging tongues." Instead of retreating, they moved forward. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, early enough that spring planting wouldn't interfere, but late enough that winter's grip should have loosened. Harold insisted on paying for everything despite Roscoe's offers to contribute, stating firmly that giving his daughter a proper wedding was his privilege. As the day approached, practical preparations overshadowed emotional doubts. Beatrice's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim, hung in her bedroom, a tangible reminder of the commitment she'd made. Rosco, meanwhile, commissioned a proper suit from the town tailor, unwilling to be married in his everyday clothes. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, with wildflowers beginning to dot the prairie and birds returning from their winter absence. It seemed a good omen after the harsh winter nature itself, celebrating new beginnings. Beatrice woke early, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. By midday, she would be Mrs. Forrester, a transformation both thrilling and terrifying. As her friend Martha helped with her hair and dress, reality began to sink in. "You look beautiful," Martha said, adjusting the simple veil. "Rosco won't know what hit him." "If he shows up," Beatrice murmured, giving voice to the fear that had haunted her for weeks. Martha looked shocked. "Why wouldn't he? The man's besotted with you. People change their minds. Especially when everyone's telling them they're making a mistake." "Is that what you're worried about? The gossip?" Martha turned Beatrice to face her. "Listen to me. I've known you since we were girls playing with corn-husk dolls. You've never cared what people think before. Why start now?" "Because it's not just my life anymore," Beatrice admitted. "What if everyone's right? What if this is a terrible mistake and we're rushing into something that can't possibly work?" "Do you love him?" The question, so simple yet so fundamental, caught Beatrice off guard. "Yes," she said after a moment. "More than I thought possible. And does he love you? Not the idea of you or what you represent, but you stubborn opinions, fierce independence and all." A smile tugged at Beatrice's lips. "He says those are the things he loves most." "Then the rest is just noise," Martha declared, placing the veil carefully over Beatrice's upswept hair. "Focus on what matters, the two of you building a life together." The wisdom in those words carried Beatrice through the morning as she prepared to leave for the small church where the ceremony would take place. Her father, looking distinguished in his best suit despite his still frail health, waited to escort her. "You're the image of your mother on our wedding day," he said, voice thick with emotion. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." "Do you think she would approve? Of Rosco, I mean." Harold smiled gently. Your mother believed in love above all else. She would approve of any man who looks at you the way Rosco does, like you're the sun and moon and stars all wrapped into one person. Reassured, Beatrice took her father's arm, ready to begin the short walk to the church where friends and neighbors, both supportive and skeptical, would witness her marriage to the man who had transformed her life in less than a year. They never made it to the church. 2 blocks from their destination, shots rang out from the direction of the bank. Screams followed, then more gunfire. Townspeople scattered, some running toward the commotion, others away from it. From up the street, Beatrice could see Rosco resplendent in his new suit running toward the bank instead of the church, the sheriff close behind him. "Father, get to safety," she instructed, gathering her skirts. Before he could protest, she had darted across the street to the general store, unlocking the door with the key she always carried. Harold called after her in vain as she disappeared inside, emerging moments later with her father's shotgun. By now, the street had become a battlefield. The sheriff lay wounded near the bank steps, and Rosco had taken cover behind a water trough, exchanging fire with the robbers who had apparently decided to strike during the distraction of a town wedding. And that was how Beatrice found herself crouched behind an overturned wagon in her wedding dress, shotgun in hand, while her intended groom fought for his life across the street. It wasn't the wedding day either of them had imagined, but perhaps it was oddly fitting, facing danger together, relying on each other when plans fell apart. Now, as the gunfire momentarily ceased, Rosco caught her eye and nodded. They had reached a silent understanding. When the outlaws made their move, they would be ready. "Throw down your weapons," one of the robbers called out. "We're leaving with this money and we'll shoot anyone who tries to stop us." "There's no way out," Rosco shouted back. "The whole town knows what's happening. Surrender now, and no one else gets hurt." The response was another volley of bullets that splintered the wood around him. Rosco ducked lower, calculating his options. He had 3 bullets left and at least 3 outlaws to contend with. Across the street, Beatrice had the shotgun, but only at close range would it be truly effective. Their salvation came from an unexpected quarter. Harold Blackburn, ignoring his daughter's instructions to seek safety, had made his way to the livery stable. Now he appeared at the far end of the street, driving a wagon at full speed toward the bank. The distraction was brief but crucial. The outlaws turned their attention to this new threat, giving Rosco the opening he needed. He emerged from cover, firing with deadly accuracy. 2 shots, 2 outlaws down. The third turned his gun toward Rosco, but before he could fire, the boom of Beatrice's shotgun filled the air. The final robber crumpled to the ground. In the sudden silence that followed, Rosco and Beatrice stared at each other across the debris-strewn street. Her wedding dress was ruined, his suit was torn, and both were covered in dust and gunpowder residue. And yet, in that moment, they had never looked more perfect to each other. "I believe," Rosco said as he walked toward her, holstering his revolver, "we were on our way to get married." Beatrice laughed, the sound slightly hysterical with relief. "You still want to go through with it? After all this?" "Especially after all this," he replied, taking her hand. "I can't think of a better partner to face life's surprises with." Judge Wilson emerged trembling from the bank, along with the other wedding guests who had taken shelter inside. "I think," he said shakily, surveying the aftermath of violence, "that we might postpone the ceremony until—" "No," Beatrice interrupted firmly. "We're getting married today, right now." "But the church here will do fine," Rosco said, not taking his eyes off Beatrice. "If the bride agrees." She nodded, handing the shotgun to her father, who had now joined them. "I agree. We've waited long enough." And so, in the middle of Concordia's Main Street, Surrounded by townspeople still in shock from the robbery attempt, Beatrice Blackburn and Rosco Forrester were married. Her dress was torn and mudded, his face was streaked with gunpowder, and the wedding rings had to be retrieved from the pocket of his damaged suit jacket. None of it mattered. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony with remarkable composure given the circumstances, his voice growing stronger as he moved through the familiar words. When he pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd, many of whom had doubted this marriage would ever take place, erupted in cheers. "Well, Mrs. Forrester," Rosco said as he leaned in to kiss his bride, "I promise our life together won't be boring." "I'm counting on it, Mr. Forrester," Beatrice replied with a smile that outshone the spring sunshine. The impromptu street wedding became the stuff of local legend, retold and embellished over the years until the outlaws numbered a dozen, and the newlyweds had single-handedly saved the entire town. More important than the story itself, however, was what came after. The skeptics who had predicted disaster for the hasty marriage found themselves repeatedly proven wrong as days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years. The union that nobody thought would work became a testament to what was possible when two strong individuals chose to build a life together as equals. They began their married life in Roscoe's ranch house, which Beatrice immediately set about transforming from a Spartan bachelor's quarters to a proper home. She brought her books, her mother's china, and her own distinct opinions about everything from furniture placement to meal planning. Rosco welcomed her influence, recognizing that the house became truly a home under her touch. Their adjustment to married life wasn't without challenges. Both were accustomed to independence and making decisions alone. Learning to consult each other, to compromise, to think in terms of we, instead of I, these were skills that developed gradually, sometimes painfully. Their first serious disagreement came 3 weeks after the wedding, when Beatrice discovered Rosco had purchased additional cattle without discussing it with her. The investment was significant, using funds they had planned to save for other improvements. "We agreed to make financial decisions together," she reminded him heatedly. "Yet you committed our money without even mentioning it to me." "It was an opportunity that wouldn't wait," Rosco explained. "The price was too good to pass up. That's not the point. The point is partnership, the very thing I insisted on before agreeing to marry you." The argument that followed was fierce, with both defending their positions passionately. It ended only when Rosco acknowledged the fundamental issue wasn't about cattle at all. "You're right," he conceded finally. "I made a decision that affected both of us without consulting you. It won't happen again. Promise me," Beatrice insisted, still angry but softening. "I promise. Equal partners in everything." He kept his word, and in doing so established a pattern that would define their marriage. Disagreements were inevitable, but they faced them directly, with honest communication and mutual respect. Neither dominated the other. Instead, they learned to blend their strengths and accommodate their differences. True to her conditions, Beatrice continued working at the store, riding into town 3 days a week while Rosco managed the ranch. On the days she was home, she took on the household accounts and correspondence, her neat handwriting and facility with numbers proving invaluable as their operations expanded. When Harold's health declined again that autumn, they made another adjustment. The back room of the ranch house was converted into a bedroom for him, allowing Beatrice to care for her father while maintaining their privacy. Rosco welcomed the arrangement, having grown genuinely fond of Harold and recognizing how important the father-daughter bond was to Beatrice. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for at first," Harold told Rosco one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "When you came to town, I thought you were just another drifter who'd move on when things got difficult." "What changed your mind?" Rosco asked. "The way you look at my daughter, like she's a miracle you can't quite believe is real," Rosco smiled. "That's exactly how I feel about her." "Then you'll do," Harold said with finality. "You'll do very well indeed." The first year of marriage brought its share of both joys and sorrows. The cattle Rosco had purchased, the cause of their first significant argument, proved to be an excellent investment when beef prices rose dramatically that fall. Their financial situation stabilized, allowing for improvements to both the ranch and the store. In December, however, Harold's health took a turn for the worse. Despite Beatrice's devoted nursing and the doctor's best efforts, he slipped away peacefully 2 days after Christmas. Having lived to see his daughter happily settled, grief hit Beatrice hard. Although she had been preparing for her father's death since his first illness, the reality was devastating. Rosco gave her space to mourn while ensuring she wasn't alone in her sorrow. He arranged the funeral, managed the store temporarily, and simply held her through the nights when tears came unbidden. "I don't know how to be in a world without him," she confessed one evening as they sat before the fire. "He was my constant, the one person who never left, never changed." "He lives on in you," Rosco said gently. "In your strength, your determination, your loyalty, and in our memories." "Our children will never know him," Beatrice said, the words emerging before she had fully formed the thought. Rosco's expression softened. "Are you telling me something, Mrs. Forrester?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but someday. I want our children to know about him, about the man who shaped who I am." "They will," Rosco promised. "We'll make sure of it." Spring 1876 brought renewal in more ways than one. As the prairie bloomed with wildflowers, Beatrice confirmed what she had suspected for weeks: she was expecting their first child. The news transformed their shared grief into cautious joy, giving them a future to focus on rather than the past they had lost. "Father would have been so happy," Beatrice said as they sat on the porch swing, Rosco's hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "He always wanted grandchildren. He'll be watching over this little one," Rosco assured her. "The best parts of him live on in you and now in our child." The pregnancy progressed without complications, though Beatrice chafed at the gradually increasing limitations on her activities. Rosco walked a fine line between protectiveness and respecting her independence, learning when to insist she rest and when to step back. By summer, her condition was obvious, generating a new wave of gossip in Concordia. This time, however, the talk was largely positive. Those who had bet against the marriage now had to acknowledge its success. The former drifter and the headstrong shopkeeper's daughter had defied expectations, building a partnership that strengthened them both. Their son, Harold Rosco Forrester, was born on a crisp October morning in 1876. He had his father's strong features and his mother's determined expression from the first day, a perfect blend of both parents that delighted everyone who saw him. "He's magnificent," Rosco said in awe, holding his son for the first time. "Perfect in every way." "Of course he is," Beatrice replied with exhausted pride. "He's ours." Parenthood brought new challenges to their partnership. Beatrice, accustomed to managing her time and energy as she saw fit, now had to adjust to the constant demands of an infant. Rosco, meanwhile, found himself torn between ranch responsibilities and his desire to support his wife and bond with his son. Their solution, like everything else in their marriage, was built on compromise and mutual support. Rosco arranged for additional help with the ranch, allowing him more time at home. Beatrice adjusted her schedule at the store, bringing little Harold with her some days and working from home on others. When Harold was 6 months old, they hired a young widow named Sarah to help with household duties and childcare, giving Beatrice more flexibility. The arrangement benefited everyone. Sarah needed the income and housing they provided, while the Forresters gained valuable assistance, and occasionally even an evening alone together. Those moments of privacy became precious as their family and business responsibilities grew. One such evening, as they rode back from a rare dinner in town, Beatrice reflected on how far they had come. "You remember what people said when we announced our engagement?" she asked. "That we were making a terrible mistake, that it would never last." Rosco smiled, guiding the wagon along the familiar road home. "I remember. They gave us 6 months at most. And here we are, nearly 2 years married with a beautiful son and a thriving ranch. Not to mention the most successful general store in the county," Rosco added. Under their joint management, Blackburn's general store had expanded its inventory and customer base considerably. "We proved them all wrong," Beatrice said with satisfaction. "Every single day," Rosco agreed, reaching over to take her hand. "And I intend to keep doing so for the next 50 years at least." The years that followed saw the fulfillment of that promise. Their family grew with the addition of a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, in 1879, and another son, James Harold, in 1882. The ranch prospered as Roscoe's careful management and Beatrice's business acumen combined to weather the economic ups and downs that challenged many of their neighbors. The store in town remained a family enterprise, eventually managed by their oldest son when he reached adulthood. Harold Rosco Forrester inherited both his father's way with people and his mother's head for numbers, making him ideally suited to carry on the Blackburn Forrester legacy. Through it all, the joys of watching their children grow, the sorrows of losing friends and facing hardships, the daily work of building a life together, Rosco and Beatrice maintained the partnership they had established from the beginning. Equal in decision-making, respectful of each other's strengths, and united in their commitment to family and community. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in the spring of 1900, hosting a grand party at the ranch that had grown from Roscoe's modest beginning to one of the most successful operations in the county. Friends and family gathered to honor the couple whose unlikely marriage had become a model of what was possible when love and respect formed the foundation. "A toast," declared their son Harold, now a husband and father himself, "to my parents, who taught us all what true partnership looks like. To Rosco and Beatrice Forrester, who prove every day that love conquers all doubts." As glasses were raised around them, Rosco leaned close to his wife, his voice meant for her alone. "Was it worth it, taking a chance on a dusty cowboy all those years ago?" Beatrice smiled, the years having softened but not diminished the spirit that had first captured his heart. "The best decision I ever made," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Though I'll never admit how right my father was about you. He knew before either of us did," Rosco acknowledged, "that we were meant to build this life together." As the celebration continued around them, they shared a private moment of reflection on the unlikely beginning of their journey, the obstacles they had overcome together, and the legacy they had created through their enduring love. The marriage that nobody thought would work had not just survived but thrived, becoming a testament to what was possible when two people committed to facing life's challenges side by side, proving love's strength not through grand gestures but through daily devotion. In Concordia, Kansas, and beyond, the story of Rosco and Beatrice Forrester became legendary not for the dramatic circumstances of their wedding day, though that tale was still recounted with relish, but for the life they built afterward. A life that demonstrated with quiet certainty that love, when paired with respect, communication, and shared purpose, could indeed conquer all doubts, day after day, year after year. And in that achievement lay their greatest legacy, not in land or wealth, or even the children who carried their names forward, but in the example they set for generations to come. An example of marriage as true partnership, of love as an active choice renewed each day, and of the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when two people face life's journey together, believing in each other when no one else does.